Well, hello, dear listeners, and welcome back to another episode of the Reforming Nerdom podcast. I am your host for this episode, Jordan Cecile, and I am joined today by a very special guest, the one, the only, Chris Poots, aka Pooty, aka Pastor Pooty? Pastor Pooty? How? Pastor Pooty?
Elder P is what
Elder
I keep
P,
saying,
dang
'cause
it, that's what it
there's
is. Elder
nothing good
P.
that rhymes with Pooty.
Yeah, Elder
So
P. Yes. So Chris is joining us. Chris is another one of our pastors at Crossroads Bible Church with Nate and Ben. And he's also one of the hosts of the Rebel podcast with Nate. Chris, how are you on this glorious, I guess it would be a Tuesday morning?
I'm great. How are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. I'm glad we
complain.
get
Thanks
to
for having me.
Yeah, well, I mean, Nate and Ben are a little bit busy today because they're actually recording, as I'll kind of get into a little bit later in the episode, a new show that we are going to be releasing, the two of them. It's their little pet project. And well, here, why don't I just even announce it right now? They're working on what they are calling Conversations by Stormlight. And we're going to be releasing it in a couple weeks. And it's Nate and Ben working through the Stormlight archive, talking about it, book one. I think that's what episode 1 is, starting through, and they're going to just work their way through as they're reading it because they, not to anyone's surprise, love it. And Chris, I'm sure you have told, how many times did you tell Nate, hey, Nate, you need to read the Stormlight Archive? How many times?
Oh, 200 at least.
Yeah.
So here's my little thing. I'm gonna brag for me and you a little bit, Jordan. So
I like that.
I kind of take credit around the church of getting everybody into Stormlight because I think I convinced you, and then you, like the good John the Baptist, went and proclaimed it to everybody, which got everybody actually listening because nobody listens to me, but they listen to you. And then they all read it. But Nate and Ben are like the holdouts. So
I know.
It's kind of funny to me that they're so into it now. And I'm like, I'm kind of past it. Like,
I know.
I'm done with that. Like,
No, there's so much, because that's the thing is, like, as we're going to talk about today, we're just going to talk about a lot of books and some of our favorite series. But yeah, like I like it. I mean, I love it. I love the whole Cosmere.
me too.
But it's like, I am now, it's like, okay, that's done. Cool. On to other things. And I'm realizing, just like a lot of people, when they first realize there's more to fiction than Lord of the Rings, Narnia, and Harry Potter, that it's like, oh, there's more than just the Stormlight Archive. There's more than just the Cosmere. And there are so many good series out there. But yeah, it's so funny how it has just absolutely captivated the minds of the people in our church, where it's true. Like, you said, hey, just do it. Just read it. You'll like it. I started reading it. And then I was absolutely hooked. And I just, it's kind of what I do, though. And some people might find that annoying about me. I don't know. But you will always know when I'm into something because I have to talk about it. It's just like a thing that I do. Even when I learn by teaching. So it's like, if I'm excited about something, I want you to be excited with me. And so that's where it's like, yeah, I told everybody. And now, I mean, what do we got? We've got probably 10 to 12 people in the church right now actively reading the Stormlight Archive. Melissa is listening to it for the second time in a year because she's that into it. And now she's like, it's just all she does now in her spare time. If she's doing dishes, laundry, whatever, cooking, going for a walk, she's listening to the Stormlight Archive. So
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Do you feel vindicated is the question I have for you right now.
Yeah, for Nate, with Nate 100%, because I was like, I told you so. Like, I told you, man. But for everybody else, I'm a little bit like you. I wouldn't say I'm a little bit. I think I'm a lot like you in this regard. Like, I don't believe in half measures at all. I'm either fully in or I'm not in at all. So when I get into a series like Stormlight, I'm all in. Like, I'm gonna read everything, study it, do all that stuff. But what was interesting is, prior to me and you becoming friends, I didn't have any friends to talk about this stuff with. So it was only like Reddit, Discord, stuff like that, for like me to be like, I want to nerd out, but I don't have anybody to nerd out with. And so, like, Nate, I used to nerd out with a lot about this stuff, but then obviously he started having a family and his time for fiction and things like that did diminish when his kids were under 5, right? Like, so you kind of like lose that buddy. And so it was great when you came around and I found out you were into this stuff as well. Cause then I'm like, oh, now I have somebody to like even just be like, you should enjoy this too. So it's, for me, it's kind of fun watching everybody, and I'm sure it is for you as well, Jordan, experience what we experienced going through it. So like, it helps me almost kind of like relive the the book a little bit, so to speak,
Yeah.
when I'm like,
Yep.
Nate, like I'll ask Nate, like, where are you at? And he'll be like, oh, I'm, particularly in Way of Kings, when he's like, oh, I'm when Bridge 4 is about to go rescue Dalinar. I'm like, oh man, like you don't even understand. I don't want to spoil the books, but it's just fun in that way. So I do feel vindicated, but I also feel like just generally excited, like because um I'm sure we'll talk about it. There's a lot of good stuff that you can like that isn't explicitly Christian, but you can take Christian
Yep.
themes from that you can learn about. And so like Stormlight, I would say is one of those things that there's a lot of symbolism, some bad, some good, but um and just bravery, good traits that like help me cultivate like how I want to be, even though it's not specifically a Christian book or anything. He's a Mormon guy, so
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
even that, I think it's loosely Mormon, to be honest with
I
you. But
mean, yeah, I think over the last, like, 5 years, since COVID, really, I think his even adherence to Mormon doctrine is waned. Again, I don't know how the Mormon Church has deviated, and I'm sure they're shifting left, but I think he's outside of even the bounds of Mormon orthodoxy. But the thing that I find really interesting, and I think it's just a testament to a really good book and a good author and a good world, is that everybody who I know who's reading these, it seems like it has birthed in them or, like, brought back to life a love of fiction, and I think that's a thing that a lot of people in our kind of theological camp, we can fall into really easily, is just you get so hungry for theology that all you read is theology, and it's like, okay, I read a lot of dead guys, read a lot of the modern theologians, the eschatology books, or, books on baptism and books on, whatever, and then you realize it's been 5 years since you've actually enjoyed a good fiction, but then you sit down and you're just absolutely engrossed with and captivated by this book, and at least for me personally, there's nothing I find more satisfying. Like, I love video games, I enjoy watching movies. There's nothing more satisfying than when you are into a book and you can just sit down in quiet. Like, for me, I have a reading chair in my living room with a lamp and my table for my whiskey, which I often do in the evening if I'm reading. That is, like, the absolute perfect moment for me, is, like, just is having that really good book, and I'm just, "This is it. I'm into it." And I absolutely love that, and I like seeing that other people are doing that as well. Because yeah, like Josh in our church, right? He because of the nature of his work, he can often listen to audiobooks when he's working, and so then he'll just sit there all day for 8 hours, and he's like, "Okay, what should I read next?" And I just keep giving him all these books, like, almost all of them are ones that you've recommended to me, and then he's now ahead of me, and he's read more than I have because just has the time to listen to the audiobooks. But it's just cool seeing just this fostering of a love for fiction, which, I mean, for myself anyways, and I know some others, it's just we kinda lost it just because we get so consumed with theology.
yeah, I think it's actually a good thing to reclaim because I was thinking about this the other day. Uh, uh, like God is obviously Father. He's holy. He's all this, but he's also artistic and creative because he created this entire world, right? He's telling a story of redemption. He's telling a story in each of our lives, however you want to put it. Even nature itself is telling a story. So when we get to the idea of like fiction and stuff, it's fiction for us, but like it is kind of scratching that like artistic and creative vein, so to speak, that I think some of us have. Not everybody. My father-in-law could care less about fiction. You know what I mean? Like, but I know for guys like you and me, like it kind of actually helps me balance my theology, my love of like all of that stuff as well, because it helps me put things in proper perspective and honestly, like I'm very similar to you. Like there's nothing I don't love more than a good story. You know what I mean? If that's you telling me a good story, if that's me hearing a good story, but reading a good story like is like, to me the top. So I don't have a better way to unwind at the end of a stressful day than sitting down and reading, stories of valor, stories of, life and whatnot. And uh, you know, with that, you have to be careful that you don't read stuff that's totally crap or garbage or whatever. But like, there's a lot of good stuff out there that if you can put it in its proper place, it actually can help.
Mhm.
Um, Actually, I would say it actually helps me deepen a lot of my core beliefs because I can see either one where they're not lining up, or values and virtues that I think are positive things being played out in a kind of an example of that way, which is really for me really, really great. So,
Yeah.
and I
Well,
also think it's funny. Sorry to just talk a ton,
no,
but
no, go ahead. That's why you're here.
it's funny the Reformed camp generally still loves C.S. Lewis. You know what I mean? Like, he's kind of one of those guys who wasn't really reformed himself, but transcends into the Reformed camp as like somebody we celebrate, right? And almost every C.S. Lewis book, though, is riffing on folklore, fantasy, mythology, which is all fiction, fantasy stuff. You know what I mean? Like, and so it's funny that we love C.S. Lewis, but we hate the thing that actually made C.S. Lewis's ministry what it was, if that makes
Yep.
sense.
Yep.
We're like, you'll get like Christians. I'll probably get myself canceled for this, but like we'll rip on Harry Potter and say Harry Potter's the devil and it's awful, but be totally fine with Gandalf and Narnia, where it's like they're actually more magical, so to speak, than Harry Potter. And I understand there's some witchcraft and that, like, your conscience on that stuff. But it's just funny how they like we celebrate one and we criticize the other. So much so that I think some of the reformed folk run away from the fiction, sci-fi, fantasy kind of realm rather than do what I think we should do is put it all under the foot of Jesus, if that makes sense. So
Yeah. Well, I actually, and we've talked about this a bunch in previous episodes, just how it is when I truly believe it was when I had a change in theological perspective in coming to Crossroads that I felt like I could rightly and without guilt enjoy reading fiction.
good.
Because like when you do have that mind of, you know what, hunker down, everything's gonna get worse, we're gonna lose, Jesus can go back at any minute. We need to just go every waking second of every day ought to be in evangelism and, going out there and, saving people from the fires of hell, which again, as we always say, is not like, yes, yes, we do that. But then it is also because God is conforming the world to his kingdom and he's transforming everything. It's actually okay to sit down and not feel the angst of an impending doom and just enjoy a really good story. And like,
Yeah,
so it freed me to do that because I honestly felt that guilt where it's like, no, I need to study more theology. I need to read another apologetics book so I can be more sharpened to go out on the streets and evangelize. I need to be able to hone my skills in these different things. And again, those are good things to do. And that's where I think one of the things we'll talk about is just balancing that. At some point, I think that's an important thing because I think you do a good
sure.
job of balancing it and sometimes I'm even feeling myself right now veering too far in the only reading fiction now because I'm so interested and captivated by all these cool stories. I feel like I'm a decade behind at least on all these cool stories. But yeah, I think that's where when you see creation rightly and you understand God is actually okay with that, it just frees you to do it. But even like right here, I think I have a quote from C.S. Lewis. I've got a few here. Um, yeah, when I was 10, I read fairy tales in secret and would have been ashamed if I had been found doing so. Now that I am 50, I read them openly. When I became a man, I put away childish things, including the fear of childishness and the desire to be very grown up. Nate shared that in one of our previous episodes, and it's just
Hey,
like here's C.S. Lewis, brilliant theologian, one of the smartest men ever, really. I don't think many people would say that C.S. Lewis is one of the most brilliant men, and yet here he is just thinking that it's okay, right? It's okay. And even here's another one: literature adds to reality, but it does not simply describe it. It enriches the necessary competencies that daily life requires and provides. And in this respect, it irrigates the deserts that our lives have already become. So here's this man who just sees it as allowing us to better understand the world, allowing us to live better in the world by having these stories and all of that. So, anyways, I think yeah, I mean,
right.
we're not at all ashamed here about reading and but before we get into more of that, because I think one of the things that Chris why I wanted Chris on here is the fact that you and I just talk about books all the time.
Yes,
We're
we do.
talking about the books we're reading, and I think it'd be kind of fun to just hear from you as somebody who has I would say, a good understanding of the world and creation and proper balance when it comes to these things. How some of the stories and worlds that you like, some of the things you don't like, what do you find valuable in fiction, what things you don't like, all those types of things. I think would be good for us to talk about. But really quick, I just want to just bring up a couple news stories that were in the news this week, and one of them is related to last week, where we talked about the Minecraft movie and just the fact that this movie is even a thing. Have you been listening, Chris, or have you heard anything about this Minecraft movie in the news since it came out?
Not in the news, but like, obviously I do youth at the church, and so
Right.
tons of the youth are like, "Have you seen the Minecraft movie yet? Have you gotten
Okay.
to see it?" I'm like, "No." Like, I didn't
So
even know, like,
have you heard about the chicken jockey thing in the theaters? Have they talked about that as well?
no, no, I just saw that a theater got destroyed or
Yes,
something
it's
with it.
it's
Like,
everywhere. It's all over the place. Like theaters all around. I'm guessing the world, maybe just America, but people when this like particular scene happens where this like silly chicken thing, like a zombie hops on a chicken or something like that, they then literally just start trashing the theater, throwing food and drinks everywhere. But then it got even worse recently where people started bringing in fireworks into the
oh,
theater. And it's like, guys, that's how you burn a building down, you absolute clowns. Like, what are you doing? But anyway, so that's been a thing. So anyways, just a little update there is it keeps making more money and this is again from the same person from last week, Pamela McClintock from the Hollywood Reporter, and she's just showing how the movie has now cleared the $550 million mark worldwide. So this movie is just making so much stinking money. It Ben is just seething in seeing this. But okay, that movie's making tons of money, great, silly movie, whatever. The thing that I find really encouraging is that this movie, The King of Kings, which is a new animated movie that's coming out in time for Easter, is actually doing extremely well. And it was, I believe, I don't know if I have the tweet up right here in front of me here, but no, that's the ha, okay. Pause on that for a second. I meant to say if you really like Chicken Jockey and you like Lego, there is a Lego set for that. So, all of our Lego listeners, go to YouTube. You can see the video here, or the image here of a Minecraft movie Chicken Jockey Lego set, which you can buy. So, I mean, ta burn your own house down. Don't go to a movie theater and do it. Build a Lego. But the King of Kings movie has like an A plus score, cinema score, and I guess only 128 movies have ever got an A plus rating on cinema score. And so this movie, which has apparently just a massive cast. So if you can see here, like Oscar Isaac is plays Jesus, Pierce Brosnan, Kenneth Branagh, Mark Hamill, Uma Thurman, Ben Kingsley, Forrest Whitaker. Like these are like A-list, top-tier Hollywood actors, and they win in an animated movie about Jesus,
that's amazing.
right? And so and the fact that it was, like, seems to be really well done, it seems to be doing really well. I think more and more theaters are now picking it up. I did see that actually the theater in London, they do have it, so I might actually try to take the kids to it at some point soon, but listeners, like one of the things, like this is something that we rejoice in, right? We often talk about that where we want to see good Christian content. I mean, I would really like to see, while this is awesome, I would really like to see a story m- that has this kind of cast and has a Christian message that doesn't have to have Jesus in it. But the fact that these actors are willing to put their name with a project with Jesus is actually fascinating to me that they were willing to do that and it's doing really well and it doesn't seem like they're being uh canceled for doing it.
No, that's amazing. You showed me the cast, when we were chatting just before we came on air, and I'd heard of the movie, but I didn't know Mark Hamill, Uma Thurman, Ben Kingsley, like, obviously Oscar Isaac's huge right now, were
Mhm.
in the movie. You know what I mean? Like that's unbelievable. And it's amazing. I think what you said is great. Like it's amazing that it's doing well on the first hand because I think we need Christian movies, particular ones that are, telling the gospel story or whatnot, to do well in theaters. I think that's great. Um, and then these actors tying their names to it, and it's not gonna hurt their career in any way. We need some then movies come out that aren't, like quote unquote Bible story movies, but like, what C.S. Lewis did, that kind of
Mhm.
thing that are good Christian messages without, necessarily being a Bible story. And it's great if this movie does great. Some of these actors might be in other movies, but also you might get other actors to be like, oh, it's not a death knell to the career like it was 5 years ago to have anything associated with Christianity in your life. Remember? Do you remember when Chris Pratt did that speech and it was like he was like the only one that like was able to come out and say he was a believer. I don't know if he is or not, but and his career not get tarnished. So now, and then all of a sudden, 5 years later, we have, well, Luke Skywalker, Uma Thurman. You know what I mean?
I
Like,
know.
um,
James Bond.
yeah. If I know all the names
Yeah.
of the actors in the movie, it's got a big cast because,
Yeah.
like, the only one I don't know is Roman Griffin, who
You know what? Yeah, what else is he's definitely been in other stuff. What else has this kid been in? Oh, that was it. He was the kid in Jojo Rabbit, that, Taika Waititi Hitler kinda thing. I never actually saw it, but people
I
said it
didn't
was
see it
really
either.
good. Yeah, so that was, I think, his big movie to kick off his career. But yeah, I mean, like, you really I think this is really exciting. I think we need to be happy about it. I mean, if we look here, just the Rotten Tomato score, I'm curious, is that the critics? Yeah, look at that. Critics, 64%, 98% for the actual fans.
Yeah, which
So,
is the one that matters.
which is
So
ultimately what a studio actually cares about, because nobody really
yeah,
cares about what a critic has to say. But yeah,
no,
anyways, I
exactly.
think that is really cool. And
It's
listeners,
awesome.
I mean, the only reason I think I could see somebody being really opposed to this is people who would see this as a second commandment violation. It's a depiction of Jesus. Some people would have issues with that. I mean, I personally don't. I do not see this as a real life depiction of Christ trying to emulate or cause us to worship Him. I mean, you can get into the nitty gritty on what that commandment is actually saying, but if that is not a moral or a conscience issue for you, go see the movie, pay for tickets, support it, because that's where these kind of things, we get more of it, is if we actually put our money behind it and go and support
Absolutely.
it. The theaters wanna see it, like, that's the thing, like, it's one thing to have it streaming on Angel Studios where it's like, "Cool, you go, pay your whatever monthly thing it is for that," but, like, this is theaters will be wanting to carry these things. So instead of launching in, 200 cinemas across North America, all of a sudden you have a full release because the actual theaters are going to go and say, no, we want it because we know it's going to make us money because people are going to come with their kids. When people come with kids, they buy popcorn. No, we want more of this. And so we have to actually like go pay the money, sit down, do the thing. And that's how we win, is by doing stuff like that.
Yeah, and what's interesting too is like you get like you know younger demographics, young fathers, which I think the stats are now in North America, the most conservative demographic is like 18 to 30-year-old men, which
Yeah.
is generally young fathers and guys who are starting to think. So you get a movie like this where they could take their family and not have to worry about, it being impure,
Yeah.
something that they could show their kids can enjoy. It will then allow them to spend money. Whereas, like, Snow White right now is out or whatever it was out and it made like no money. And it's like, well, as a young father, is it probably taking his kids to a woke version of Snow White? You know what I mean? Like, and it's funny, like, we're talking about this, and then Netflix is coming out with Narnia, where they're casting Aslan as a chick, and
Oh
it's
my word.
like Netflix, catch up because the culture is shifting back now conservative. Like, maybe you
Okay.
should not do that.
Speaking on
So
that, I won't have it up on here just because I can't remember if there might be inappropriate language in it, but I just saw this morning on X. I still call it Twitter. It's Twitter.
it's sorry.
But it was somebody was posting and they were saying like, "Wow, I might actually start watching SNL, Saturday Night Live again." And it was this clip of oh, Ken Ham? No, not Ken Ham. Who's the guy who played the advertiser dude in, is it Ken Ham? No, the Ken
John
Ham's the Answers in
John Hamm.
Genesis. John Hamm, thank you. Um, and it was like him and this other guy playing these 2 gay dudes, and they're in the living room, and there's 2 other couples, and they have this baby, and the people are like, "Where'd where'd you guys get this baby?" Like, "How dare you? We have like, this is our baby." And then they were actually like, the 2 couples were like, "But where did it come from? Because 2 men can't have a baby." And the whole skit was them just
Wow.
seemingly ripping on, not like I shouldn't say ripping on, but like pointing out kind of the problem in this of 2 gay dudes taking a kid, and like the fact that they were actually acknowledging that it takes a woman, a man and a woman to actually make a baby. And it was, I watched it, I could not believe that Saturday Night Live was like actually poking the sacred cow of sodomy and making fun of it. It was crazy. So I'll send it
It's
to you after
glorious.
if you want it.
Well, like,
I mean, so when we're talking about just like that culture shift, Saturday Night Live was right up there with, uh, oh, who was the late night talk show guy who danced around with like vaccines?
I'll just start naming them off. Fallon,
Colbert. Colbert.
Correll. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. He
it's
was.
like Saturday Night Live was up there with them during COVID in pushing the propaganda of all of it, and so to see them shift course and make fun of sodomy and homosexuals, it's like, oh wow, like it was almost kind of jarring. It's like we're not supposed. Like, is this allowed? Are we allowed to make fun of like gays? Is that a thing? And it's like apparently it is. Saturday Night Live does it. You and I can do it too.
Amen. I'll get more material,
Yeah,
which is fun. It's
that's
funny.
right.
It's funny. Not to be super nerdy here, but do you know? Obviously, you know who Grand Admiral Thrawn is, right?
Yeah.
Like, so he actually his whole thing is like if you want to understand a culture, you understand its art, in Star Wars, and that's kind of like how he gets ahead of like the rebels and all this stuff in the Star Wars universe. And but I actually think that's true in real life. I actually think Timothy Zahn when he wrote that is like kind of hitting on a truth. Like, if we want to understand the direction culture is headed, watch what we produce in terms of, movies, music, comedy. I think comedy is generally at the cutting edge, so to speak. So if Saturday Night Live is shifting back where it's like, we're going to make fun of what's stupid in the world,
Yeah.
and it like starts poking the sacred cow, as you said, that's probably a good sign of the content that we'll see coming out in the next 5 to 10 years. So much so that I actually kind of feel sometimes like Disney and Netflix are the two that I kind of think of when I think of this. Um, they're behind the times in terms of what they're producing, in terms of like their kind of woke nonsense. Because everything else seems to be shifting back.
Mhm.
Uh, more conservative. Even the I don't watch it anymore because the first season upset me very much. But the Wheel of Time show on Prime, I don't know if
Mm.
you've watched that at all.
No.
The first season, a travesty compared to the books, like total train wreck. But everything I've read about it since, it's actually shifted back more conservative, more back to what the books actually
Mm.
were like. And what's funny about that is the books weren't that conservative in the first place. They were kind of progressive for its time. But it's just funny that even like, when the dollars start getting affected, it's funny how quickly people like Hollywood and whatnot will change to go back to what makes the money. And clearly, the King of Kings is out making 19 million bucks in very few theaters. And Sound of Freedom did great too. You know what I mean? Like, and you get these Marvel movies recently that you know haven't actually been that great. They're actually losing more money than they were. They're still making money, obviously, but it's you know, King of Kings is doing great. So, um, I'm all here for the shift back, if that's a way to put that. So,
Yeah, and that's why it surprises me because I think you're right. We're seeing it in so many places, but I'm just genuinely confused by HBO and the new Harry Potter TV show because Black Snape, which is just to me like one of the most offensive character race swaps you could do in that entire franchise, and it's just weird because J.K. Rowling seems to be pretty. She's very outspoken about the trans stuff. Like she's been attacked quite intensely for that, but it's like the fact that they still made that decision, and then Netflix with Greta or no, oh, I forget the comedian's name, but whoever the girl is for Aslan,
that's one, yeah.
it's like you want to literally upset every single person who even remotely would care about this show. That is how you do it.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
like libs don't care about Narnia.
No,
They don't care about Narnia.
exactly. They might watch it because it's on Netflix, but
Yeah.
they're not gonna wait on bated breath for new episodes,
No,
so to
because
speak.
that series is not hiding what its allegories,
No,
right? Like
exactly.
it is pretty obvious. And so if anybody has any mind of that, which they're just gonna be like, well, why would I read this book that is clearly talking about Jesus, this guy I hate? And so but now all these people who would even care about it, it's like, well, I'm not if there's a Lady Aslan, like that to me is a line, it's like, I'm not watching this. Right. So anyways, I guess we'll see, but some encouragement, listeners. We've got much to celebrate. Both things are really good. And so, one thing that will
Amen.
tie us into our conversation a little bit is Chris. You are probably the biggest Star Wars fan I know, and I know like Ben and Nate really like Star Wars, but you have correct me if I'm wrong, read every single piece of Star Wars fiction that has been, like, officially published. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say, that's true of about halfway through 2024. So
Okay,
up until August of last year, that would be true. I haven't read anything that's been published since then,
okay.
but previous to that, I've read everything.
But
Uh,
everything that was pre-Disney, you have read,
yeah,
and
so
most or a bunch of post-Disney.
yeah, so I read so the way the Star Wars universe is kind of broken down to like expanded universe. So that was all the stuff that came out prior to Disney creating like buying Star Wars. I've read everything probably multiple times
Mhm.
in that vein. And that's like 179 adult novels, like 100-ish young adult novels, um, countless comic books, like, I've read it all. And I own, like, I don't know if you can see it, but I own almost all of it too. I sold it all to help me pay for school one year, and then I thrift books, so I pick them up and I recollect all the copies, so if you ever need to borrow any, I got them.
Yeah.
And then, the Disney canon, which is, like, since Disney, I've read almost everything, but, like, they put out 3 or 4 books a quarter, and so I just haven't I kinda wait till there's, like, a series complete, and then I kinda crank it off. But the expanded universe, the original, like, post-trilogy, so to speak, sequels to are, I think, some of the best fiction that's ever been written. So, pure, clean, fun to read, enjoyable, you can read it with your kids, and you're not worried about sex scenes, you're not worried about, you know, dismemberment, even though it is still adult content, like, but, like, I would have no problems reading most of the stories to Judah,
Right.
who's my nephew, who's, 7. I would have no problems, whereas, like, I would also read it to a 15-year-old and have no problems
Yeah.
with it because it's good, but I can still read it myself and enjoy it, so, yeah, I always make the joke, like, uh, Ben and Nate are, Padawans in their Star Wars knowledge compared to me, and I'm a Jedi Master, man, so
I mean, you've read more than any of us, and have you played a bunch of the video games too? Like, you've caught up in, like, the Jedi, like, the new ones, right? The Jedi Fallen
y
Order and
yeah, the only one I haven't played is Outlaws,
okay. Yeah, and I've heard that's
mostly just
not worth playing, so
yeah, partly that. I don't this is just a way. I don't like playing games where my character is a female.
mm,
So, because I'm not a female. So if I'm gonna play a game and I generally think of myself as the character in the game, I want to play with a dude because I'm a dude.
yeah.
Like so,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
I'm not saying I'll never do it, but like I don't get
Has
excited
to be
about
the r
that. So
yeah, yeah. So, the reason why I even bring
so
up Star Wars is there's rumors of a Star Wars horror project being produced by Disney, and this was kind of, confirmed by the director of the Andor series. So, what would your thoughts be for a Star Wars horror movie? Like, do you think they could do that in a way that is still approachable by people, or would they do you think they'd have to go and make it, like, adult not rated R maybe, but, like, 18A? Like, do you what do you think that would even look like?
yeah, there's a Star Wars horror novel. So there's a book called
Yeah,
Red
which one what
Harvest.
okay.
Yeah. Which is basically like the idea is like a clone trooper, sorry, a stormtrooper regiment gets infected by a virus and they become zombies, basically.
Uh-huh.
But they're stormtrooper zombies, which is just Star Wars' zombie story. Uh, it was a terrible book. Like it's
Mm,
one of those ones where it's like, they write 179 novels. Not all of them are going to be winners. Red Harvest isn't a winner. Mostly for me, it didn't land because I would say like, I don't go to Star Wars to read a zombie movie, if that makes sense. Like,
mhm,
I go to Star Wars because I want science fiction, so I want lightsabers and blasters and whatnot. But so it didn't really work. Now, I think they could do it if they did it like sort of right. Because a lot of the sorry, I don't know how much you've read, but in the like one of the last series before Disney bought it was called like Legacy of the Force. And Fate of the Jedi. There's kind of a zombie-ish, like horror-ish type setting in those books, which worked because it was like, a villain who's kind of a monster. But like I'm not really into it, the horror idea. Now, I'm also kind of a glutton for Star Wars stuff, so if they put it out, I'll probably watch it, and I'll probably rate it at that point. But I wouldn't say like I'm super looking forward to it. A horror. Um, sorry, I well, again, I'll just keep talking. Part of the things I think Disney has missed with the Star Wars stuff is that they're trying to win back young kids, which is great. But their fan base is now, the movies came out in the 70s, were generally popular in the 80s and the 90s. So your age base of your core fans that are nostalgic for Star Wars are 35 to 55 now. So I'm not saying you have to age the stuff up to their level, but like you can make more adult type stories with more drama, more like politics and stuff like that in our age group, because we're the ones that are going to pay for to go to see it. Like if a Star Wars movie came out that was like, you know, adultish, you know what I mean? Like I'm not meaning that in a sexual way. I just mean in terms of like it's mature.
Yep.
Me and you would go see that in a heartbeat, probably opening night. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Yep.
whereas I don't need to see a show about like, the grown up live action rebel characters from the new cartoon that came out, because that's not for me anymore. You know what I mean? Like, and I just think people have missed that idea where it's like you can win back the kids, but you win them by winning the fathers. Like if you want to get your son into Star Wars, you be in Star Wars yourself. You know what I mean? Because your kid will likely be into it if you're into it, if that makes sense. That's why
Yeah.
everybody who's a sports fan generally likes who their father's team is,
Yep.
because their father liked them. So,
Yep.
and Disney's just never caught on to that. So, but
I
horror, we'll see.
Yeah, I saw somebody in the comments of the tweet that I read, and their recommendation was the book. Again, I haven't read this. Death Troopers.
Yeah, that's
Would
the
that
second part.
of that series that you okay? So you would say that even Death Troop, so like that whole arc wouldn't. But I mean, like they're not going to use any of that old material. They pretty much consider
Yeah,
that dead, right?
yeah. Um, they'll probably like similar to what they did with the new trilogy. They'll probably pick characters and like some of the ideas, and then probably do a poor job of it.
Mm.
Um, Death Troopers was fine. Like it just, like I said, it just didn't land for me. Like, but you know, I'm not a huge horror guy in the first place.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of my one genre that I'm like in reading. Like I'll probably read almost anything. Horror is probably my last pick
Mm.
of those things. I love zombie movies, but like I don't necessarily need to read a zombie movie in a world that's already
Yeah.
established, if that made sense.
Yeah.
Like,
So what's your hype level for Andor?
Andor, like so high, it was like nine and a
Yeah.
half probably.
Okay.
I
Cool.
thought Andor season one was some of the best content they've done. Like,
Right.
so
Yeah, I'm
yeah,
about halfway through. I just haven't had a chance to finish it. We're gonna do some episodes talking about it. So I mean, like, if you want to join and talk about Andor, like, we're gonna be doing like a watch along. It's kind of weird though how they're doing it. Where not weird, but it makes creating content a little bit annoying. Where they're releasing all three like in batches of 3 episodes, and so then it's like, well, do you review all 3 episodes? In which case, you're gonna have like an hour and a half, 2 hour episode talking about 3 episodes, or do you do still episode by episode? But then, I mean, like, that's now a lot of recording and editing to do 3 separate things, so I'm not sure how we're gonna do it, but so far, I mean, yeah, I think you're right, it's fantastic. The characters are great, and even Ben, we had his family over last weekend for dinner, and he was just saying pretty much right where I am is the part where it really takes off. He said about halfway through the season, it goes from like, "Oh, this is good," to, "Oh, this is excellent." And so I'm, like, right at that cusp. It's just I haven't had the time to finish it because I've been finishing some books. So why don't we now pivot? Actually, you know what? Before we pivot to talking about books, let's quickly hear a word, from this week's, sponsor.
Hey, Reforming Nerdom listeners. If you're the kind of nerd who fuels deep theological debates or marathon game nights with a great cup of coffee, you need to check out Cosmos Coffee Company. Cosmos Coffee Company is a Christian coffee roaster in White House, Tennessee, that provides freshly roasted coffee to customers all across the U.S. and Canada. Whether you're diving into your next deep theology study or prepping for an all-night board game marathon, Cosmos Coffee has you covered. They have 7 great flavors, including the Pilgrim's Roast, a smooth, light roast with notes of blackberry, honeysuckle, and butterscotch. The Renewal Roast, a sweet Ethiopian blend with strawberry, agave, and peach. And for something extra nerdy, the Falcondra Roast, a medium Colombian inspired by Out of the Silent Planet with rich flavors of chocolate, brown sugar, and citrus. And because you're part of our nerdy fellowship, they are offering 30% off your first order for Reforming Nerdom listeners. Just use the code REFORMNERDOM at checkout. So, if you want to level up your coffee game, go to cosmoscoffeecompany.com, that's Cosmos with a K, and use Reform Nerdom, no spaces, to save 30% on your first order. Cosmos Coffee Company. Coffee roasted well for his glory, for the kingdom.
Well, welcome back, everybody. Okay, the time is now where we are going to now talk about just books. The books we like, the series we like. We're going to make some recommendations. Chris is my, as I jokingly call him, my book dealer, where he just tells me what to read, and I usually go and do it. And I have not been let down. But as I was saying before the ad read, I haven't been watching Andor because I just finished this morning the newest book in the Hunger Games series, The Sunrise on the Reaping. Were you ever a Hunger Games fan?
Yeah, I read them all.
This one included? Did you read this one?
No, I actually have that on my TBR, which is like the reword of saying what's coming up this year.
Yeah,
I'm
to be read
that
for
this year,
listeners.
so
To be read is
to be read.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So
I will read that sometime this summer.
Gut, like, it's just a gut punch. It is. Anyways, I went and Melissa was getting ready this morning, and I went for a run this morning, and I was listening to it, and then I got home and I finished it, and it was just a gut punch. And it was just one of those things where it's like, it was really good, great story. It's about, for those who don't know and you like Hunger Games, it was about Haymitch's story, about his whole Hunger Games experience. And it was just like, oh, dang it. Like, it was good, but it was just like, it was sad at times. Like, it was, those books are not light by any means. I don't know if there's ever really much that can be like joyful in it, but I really enjoyed it. It was really good. So yeah, I literally just finished that this morning and getting ready to start another book. But
Nice.
Chris, what are you right now? What's the book that you're currently reading? Fiction wise, what are you reading?
I just finished Shadows of Self by Brandon Sanderson, which is the second book in the Wax and Wayne Mistborn series. I was actually, oddly enough, I was done with the Cosmere. I was kind of like going to put it away. But you actually did the opposite, like of what you're saying. Like, you actually influenced me to read the Mistborn, the second era, because you were like, it's better than the first one. And then with the non-spoiler disaster that I thought Wind and Truth, I was like, I wanna have a good taste of Brandon Sanderson back in my mouth. So I read the first book at the start of this month. I actually quite enjoyed it, and I read the second one. I loved it. Like, I was like, I don't want to spoil anything. You'll know what I'm talking about, but the like kind of reveal at the end of that book with, I'm just like, are you kidding me right now? So I'm literally this evening. My plan is to start book 3 in that series.
Good.
And then I'll probably knock off that whole Mistborn trilogy by the end of the month, probably. That's being conservative, and then I'm gonna go to it's called the what's it called? The Bloodsworn trilogy. So which is a guy named John Gwynne.
Yeah. Is that the one where he often has like a dragon on the cover? Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like a Viking mythology story. So he's a real big guy. He's really big into like Norse mythology.
Yeah.
And so this is just kind of like a trilogy, but the third book came out at the end of last year, and I haven't got around to reading it. And so and then after that I'm going to read and I think me and you are planning to read this together. I think we're going to read The Devils by Joe Abercrombie.
Yeah,
Did we talk about this?
We were talking about it. Yeah, I've never read any Abercrombie, but you have adequately hyped him up, and in everything that I have seen online, everybody just says how good of an author he is. So it's like I'm just actually gonna buy the book, not having read any of his stuff because I've just heard and for me, I think I get caught up in hype, and I love being part of the cultural moment, and I think that was a big part of why I loved Harry Potter so or, like, what makes Harry Potter for me such a nostalgic thing is the fact that I was around and alive as the books were coming out. So as, you go into chapters and they have just like a mountain of books and you were able to go get your copy and then you could read it as everybody was reading it. And it was just like so exciting that we're reading the next Harry Potter. So now it's like if I can find books that have that where it's like I actually really love the release day. And so it's like, oh, I'm reading this when everybody else is reading it. I get really excited about that. So that's why I'm really excited about the next The Strength of the Few, which is the second book in the Hierarchy trilogy, which, okay, if we're going to talk about a thank you, Mr.
Too.
Poots, that was the best book recommendation you have given me. And that was one of the best books I've read, full stop. Like fiction books, I absolutely adored everything about that book. And so that's coming out in November. The Devils is coming out in May.
May 6th.
May
May
6th.
6th.
So, I mean, like, I haven't pre-ordered that yet, but I will be, because that's yeah, so I guess, like, even as you think about your, like, your reading stuff, I know you have a pretty meticulously planned out reading order, which is hilarious because I'm very much like, what do I feel? I finish a book, I look at my shelf, okay, what do I wanna read? It's like, "Oh, you know what? That's interesting. That's tickling my fancy a little bit, so I'm gonna have a go at this." But you actually plan out your reading meticulously. So what does that look
Yeah.
like for you?
Yeah, so it's you said something earlier about a balance, and so I mentioned earlier I'm either all in or all out. Like so, I recognize in myself that I have a bit of like obsessive personality. Like I can be addicted to stuff. So when I started to read, like I would do the same thing. I'd be like, okay, well, religious affections is hard to read right now, so I'll put that down and let me read the Wheel of Time. And so what I did is I basically crafted like kind of like I read this first and then I get to this. And so I basically built like just kind of like here's what I want to accomplish over the year in terms of reading goals. Um Mostly the one to keep me accountable that I read what I need to read and what I want to read um in like kind of in the nonfiction area. And then the fiction I kind of I plan out because there's so much out there that I could spend time with and like but I also like I want to get through the series that I actually have like enjoy and whatnot. So I basically just built like a it's gonna sound so gay, but like a spreadsheet where I'm like, here's what I want to read in the order that I want to read them. And I'm not like insanely stuck to it. Like if you were like, hey, I just read this book and it's amazing and you would love it, I'll probably bump it up and read it. You know what I mean? Like the example for me, for you and me, where you got me reading the Terminal List series a few years ago, Jack Carr, and now I read the new one every year. But that year I hadn't planned to read any of them, and I read all six of them. You know what I mean? Like
Yep,
so,
you're welcome.
I will deviate, but I basically put I go month by month. I say this is what I want to read this month, fiction, and it's broken down to 50 pages a day basically if you want to get super technical. And so I know in that 50 pages I can read, in 31 days in a month that's about 1500 pages fiction, which depending on the size of the books might be 3 or 4 or 5 books depending on the size. And I just literally build my list based on that. That's why I can say, like, when you ask like have you read the new Hunger Games, I can say no, I'm probably going to read that in the summer though, because based on where I am, that's where I'm
Right.
gonna get to it. And I do that also just to also to cap myself because I assume most of the people who listen to this also listen to like our episodes on the Rebels about this stuff. You and me did a reading competition a couple years ago,
We did.
and like it took me 5 months to recover from that
Yeah.
in the next year. So some part of my like if I structure it out goals wise is also to cap myself from kind of going insane, like in terms of
Yeah.
like, staying up at night and reading because I don't sleep a lot anyway. So um I
I
read a lot.
will
I read most of my fiction stuff rather than watch TV or be on my phone or be
right.
doing anything at night. So yeah,
I
anyway.
will never do that reading challenge again. I won't.
Yeah.
It was like what, 120 books around there for each of us in a year, and it was man, it was months before I could say I actually finished a book after we did that. I mean, I'd started a couple, dabbled here and there, but it was like I couldn't even like bring myself up to pick up a book. I was like, I'm so sick of reading. I don't want to do it. And I'm thankful now. I'd say the last maybe 2 or 3 months, it's come back where I haven't really played video games a ton lately because there's just so many books that have been like Will of the Many. It's like any chance I got where I could sit down and just like read that book, I wanted to. And I went slowly because I just liked it so much that I was like, I usually listen to an audiobook at 1.45 depending on the narrator. This one, it was like 1.2. I was like, "No, no, I'm gonna take my time. I just want to enjoy this book." And, so that book then really brought me back into reading. Now it's like, okay, I've got my kind of list of things that I wanna read. Now when you're putting your list together, if you have a book you wanna read, will you always if it's a completed series, will you always read the entirety of the series? Like, will you go, like, back to back to back, or will you take breaks in between? What do you do there?
Yeah, it depends on the size of the series. If it's like 10 books, I'll probably do what I call like a palate cleanser in between. So I'll do like 3 books, then read something short that's like kind of opposite of it. And then continue on. But if it's like a 4 or 5 book series, like I just read a book series called Lightbringer by Brent
Uh,
Weeks, who's actually
uh-huh.
a Christian guy.
Hmm.
So even though the book's tons of Christian symbolism in them, but also like you know the language isn't always great in the books because I think he's trying to be, kind of edgy. But I read all 5 of those books back to back because I enjoyed them a ton. Like I was really enjoying them. But like when the series is heavy, so to speak, I wouldn't read all of those books back to back. We mentioned Joe Abercrombie a few minutes ago. His first series is a trilogy called The First Law, which I adore, but it's a heavy read, like because it's basically total depravity on display, right? Like it's kind of like, hey, here's a whole bunch of people who don't. There isn't an overarching good versus evil type thing. This is kind of like every single person is good and evil, and they're wrestling with each individual choice. Uh, and that was heavy enough. I loved it, but it was enough that I was like, I need a break after those
Yeah,
3,
yeah.
and then I would go to something. And that's like honestly, that's kind of what Star Wars generally is. Like I generally read a Star Wars series or a Star Wars book in between other stories, if that makes sense. Because the Star Wars universe is vastly different than every other universe, so it doesn't feel like I get things mixed up. And then it kind of cleans the palette, so to speak, to go back to reading other fantasy stories. And I also just like you don't want to read like a swords and magic story and then go into another world where you have to
Mhm.
relearn all the rules and back to back. So I try to like mix that up. Historical fiction I'm really into as well, which is um, you know, you know, stories of King Alfred and things like that, which are fictional, but well, some of them are fictional. And I read a lot of those in between. But it's interesting you brought up the Will of the Many because I would say I struggled up until I read the like last year. I struggled with reading more than I ever have, simply because I was kind of burnt out from the year before. And the Will of the Many is also what kind of like reignited me. And I was like, this is phenomenal. I can't wait to read the
Mhm.
sequel. And I'm delighted that's this year.
I think it's
So
cool to even hear. I didn't know Brent Weeks was a Christian guy because James Islington or Islington, I'm not even sure actually the proper way to say that. I've heard people say it both ways, but he is a Christian. Like I found a Ask Me Anything on Reddit, and he was like, "Yep, like I'm a Reformed Presbyterian." So it's like, oh, like you're pretty much like one of us, and here he is writing these cool worlds, and because I actually really want to read now his other one. Was it the Lycania? Yeah, the
I can't.
Lycanius trilogy. Do you have those as well? There you go. You
Bookworm.
do. Yeah. So I found a girl in near Windsor who was selling all 3 of them for $40. It's like, I don't know anybody in Windsor. I don't go to Windsor ever, so, shipping was like $25, so it kinda defeated the purpose, but it's like, I really wanna get those because I think, like, we need to be supporting these authors as well who are doing the work that we're trying to call people to do, who are writing good stories. They're not just the gospel. Like they don't like they have darkness in them, and I don't think that's actually a bad thing. It's actually a conversation that Melissa and I had just as we were discussing whether we're going to let Claire, who's our oldest, and she's 8, whether she's allowed to start reading Harry Potter. And it's like, well, because Melissa's opposed to that. But one thing that Nate said, which I thought was really helpful, was he was saying with his oldest, with Quinn, that it's good to have them be afraid reading a story so they learn to deal with fear. So then when something actually scary in real life comes up, it's not the first time they've ever had to deal with a scary thing. And it's like, well, dang it, that actually like makes sense because again, it's a scary thing that's not real that even right. I mean, in Harry Potter, where you see in the woods and you find out that it's oh my goodness,
More.
Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher. Why am I drawing a blank on his name? In the
Quirrell.
Quirrell, and he's just like sucking on the neck of a unicorn, and it's like that's kind of a weird, like that's a scary thing. I can see why a kid would be scared about that, but it's like, well, here she is. She can read that in her home with her parents there. If she's scared, she can be consoled. We can talk about evil. We can talk like so. There's just like that coaching that happens there, and so because I think some of the series that you even mentioned, like that grim dark fantasy, which is what Abercrombie and I think he calls himself Lord Grimdark or King Grimdark or something on Twitter
Yeah, that's
because
kind of his nickname.
yeah, and because he's just like the best grimdark fantasy author. I don't think there's anybody who comes close, at least from what I can tell from booktubers I listen to. But even just as Christians, I think it is one of those things where if you just read these like safe stories, you don't actually deal with evil or conflict, and you're not really seeing the reality of what does the outworking of total depravity look like you said.
Good.
Like that book is just an example of it. But now you're actually see like what does this look like? And then it makes you hate it that much more because you see it. But again, you don't have to go I don't have to now go into a back alley in London where there's like really seedy stuff happening for me to be able to see what depravity looks like. But then I can also it makes me hate it more and appreciate good more. And so
Absolutely.
like that's why I think some people might find like go and look at the Abercrombie, or there's another series that you and I have liked where it's like The Lies of Locke Lamora, the Gentleman Bastard series, because like there's stuff in there where it's like I would be cautious about recommending just anybody because there is some language in it. Again, people have different sensitivities to language, and if you don't like swearing, there is some swearing. So if that's a thing for you and you're uncomfortable, don't read some of these books. And even just like as I think as a good lesson, go and look into books. Go and look at. I mean, I use ChatGPT where I'll go and type it in, and say like, is there like what's the inappropriate stuff in this book? Is this a series that? And it's like, oh, there's some language or they allude to things. There's nothing graphic. There's no like clear depictions or explanations of like sex because it's like I don't want to read that. But that's where I think it's being able to read maturely. And I'm not saying like reading adult like explicit sexual content. I mean like as a mature Christian,
Yeah.
being able to read and discern and see like what is appropriate. And I think another thing that Nate teaches from the pulpit, which is really helpful as well, is like when it comes to alcoholism, right? Like that's a thing that a lot of people say, like, oh, abstain from alcohol, or Christians would say, abstain, run away, don't let a drop touch your tongue, because you are an alcoholic. Whereas has taught from the pulpit, and like all the elders at our church, at least from what I know, would say like, no, if you're going to truly master that alcoholism, you need to be able to be around it. You need to be able to even have it in such a way that doesn't cause you to sin. And so it's like even being able to read a book that might even just use inappropriate language. Well, it's like, well, if you're not mature enough to read somebody swearing and have yourself not then go and start swearing, you probably shouldn't read that yet until you've actually been able to mature in godliness to be
Yeah.
able to hear that language without causing you to go and do it yourself.
Yeah. I think that's so right. It's funny how um so many of us will get upset with a movie that has language. And I'm not advocating if anybody's listening and saying Jordan and Chris are telling you to let your kids read the Gentleman Bastard sequence right now, be like, no, have wisdom, right? Like
Yeah.
we're I was gonna say 20 plus, but I think we're both old that, but
Yeah.
we're adults, you know what I mean? Like so like we can know this is too far for me or I can put this away. And I know the argument that some people throw at me right away is like, well, all things that aren't good aren't valuable. And I'm like, I agree. Not everything is valuable, but I think there are valuable lessons in the things that I read, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't read smut. My kind of barometer, because I do the same thing. I never use Chat GP for it. That's actually a really good idea. Um, is I don't want anything explicitly sexual. Like
Mhm.
I don't care, and two, I don't want to read that. Like
Yeah.
so like, where that line is, I'll know it when I read it. And once I start reading it, if it is, I just put it away because I don't need that. Like, and then the other one is like, I don't want them to mock my faith. So I don't mind if a fantasy world creates their own fictional religion, if that makes sense. Cause to me, that's fictional and it's not true anyway. It's all fake. The whole thing's
Mhm.
fake.
Yeah.
Um, but like I don't want them to like mock my actual faith or do like a bastardized version of my faith. If like and those are kind of my drawbacks, but like a ton of violence, a ton of a villain kind of being good and competent and uh you know winning, so to speak. Well, God told this story in this world in such a way that, well, I would say for 4,000 plus years the villains were winning. You know what I mean? Like and now the hero came and now the good guy's kingdom is re-expanding. So like, but we're not there yet. We're still fighting a lot of those villains in this today. So if God created a story where, you know, there was a ton of darkness, a ton of violence, then I'm okay to read those stories as well, as long as they're in the proper perspective that I have in terms of like what is good and true and what is fake and not um true as well. Because I often say this to people, if like if you don't want your child to read a book that has a lot of violence, a lot of sexual content, don't let them read scripture.
Mhm.
Because the darkest thing I've ever read is Judges chapters
Yeah.
18 through 20. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean that's the darkest literature that I think's ever been written,
Yeah.
other than the crucifixion of our Lord. Like so, now does that mean every story is good for you or good for me? No, I don't. I tell people to read Abercrombie very little, even though he's one of my favorite authors, because I trust you enough to be able to be mature enough to read it and be like, this isn't, gospel or anything. But I wouldn't hand that to one of the teens in our church and be like, hey, you should really read, Joe Abercrombie today. But I might give them the Wheel of Time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I would absolutely tell them to read Tolkien.
Yeah.
Um, Jason Islington, I think that's how I say it.
Yeah.
Uh, his both of his series I would hand out to anybody and say you should read it. The first one, I would say, like, is basically a story about Calvinism. Like, it's
Mm.
literally Calvinism
Mm.
in a fictional tale, and it's like,
Mm.
that's what the story kind of wrestles with. And I'm like, you know what? That helped me. And I'm a pastor, and I read that. I was like, oh, that's a really interesting way to take this. Like,
Hmm.
and so, and sorry, you said something else too that I thought was great. One of the things we're actually rooting for is not not just explicitly Christian media, but Christians to make good just like stories, like good. And so when we get guys like Brent Weeks, Jason Islington, Stephen Lawheed is another one that does this, where they're not published Christian books, they're not authors that are publishing theology books or anything, but they're authors making a career of writing, but they're Christian guys who are just letting their worldview permeate into their craft, just like we would expect a Christian business owner to have his business run in a Christian manner, which nobody would bat an eye to say that's exactly what should happen. These are just people who are their gifting is being an author or a writer, who allow their Christian worldview to seep into the pages of what they read. But for me, I can read it and pick up a lot of that Christian symbolism. But most people who read the Licanius trilogy couldn't give a rip that James Islington is a Presbyterian,
Yeah.
but they hear and they read those symbolisms and they read it, and they probably are smart enough to pick up a lot of the imagery because some of it's overt, some of it's not. But that's what we want. Like we want Christians doing what Christians ought to do. So
Yeah. You mentioned just the seemingly like inconsistencies as well with Christians when it comes to depictions of violence. And I was I saw, do you know Doug, what is it, Doug Ten Naple, the guy who creator of Earthworm Jim? He's pretty vocal on Twitter, and I guess he had, because when the David Show was coming out on Amazon, he shared a graphic that he made for a comic that he was working on, and it was like a gruesome David holding the head of Goliath, beheaded, like all bloody. And he just said Christians can't handle the story that, like, the way that the true story would be told. And it's like, you have this little shepherd boy who, not in like a smooth, graceful swipe of his sword did he take off Goliath's head. This was a giant and a little boy, and he cut his head off.
Yeah.
And right, like, but we're okay with that. I mean, like, you get into weird stuff too about like Lot and his daughters, like, that's twisted. Like, there's stuff there where it's like, so obviously, because I think a lot of Christians just have this in their mind where it's like, oh, if that thing comes into my mind, I'm in sin. It's like, okay, well, now you have to deal with the fact that God very explicitly has it in your mind that two daughters hopped on their dad and got pregnant. And so so do we not read it anymore? No, we have to properly understand it. We have to be able to then mature and guard our mind from sin and temptation so that we can read and see those things without it leading to us falling into sin ourselves. Because God wasn't in sin by putting that in there. He wasn't wrong in putting that imagery there. So what is it? So it means we have to be mature enough to read that and not have it cause us to sin ourselves.
Abs- Absolutely. Paul tells Timothy all scripture is useful for our teaching and our reproof, right? So, um, what that story is useful for, well, might be different for each of us, but it's useful because it's there. It's in scripture for a reason. You read, like, the Psalms, the story of Jericho, the Sodom and Gomorrah. You brought up Lot's wife. How about the Israelites fleeing Egypt, Baal with the prophets? There's so much stuff in scripture where there's magic on display.
Yep.
There's violence, sexual content, whatever it is. So much so that it's like this is the darkest book we're reading, but it's filled with hope and light. You know what I mean? And that's kind of what all fiction is, right? It's retellings of the same story of good and evil. It's retellings of the same hero's journey, whatever the analogy is, jilted love, whatever the themes are, which are all biblical themes that have been played out through scripture for all time. And I think you said something earlier that was really good to talk about too, was like the idea, like, uh, fiction books can help your children, can help you kind of practice for what comes up in our own lives.
Mhm.
When difficulty comes, I can think of how did Frodo and Sam deal with the trial that they had? Because, you know, I think what's the line in Lord of the Rings? Like, I wish these times never fell upon me. And he's like, so do all men who live through such times.
Yeah.
And I think of, like, we're cultivating a generation of Christians in our church that are dragon slayers that will have to fight dragons. And I don't know what their dragons are, but there will likely come a point in their lives that the line of, like, I wish I didn't have to live during this time. And if they've read Lord of the Rings, hopefully that line permeates into their brains and said,
Yeah.
so do all men who wish, but it's not for us to decide, right?
Yeah.
Like, we fight the dragons that are in front of us. And I think fiction stories, help us prepare our minds in such a way that it's like, oh, well, like, you know what? This is overcomable, and it's not on the level of scripture or anything like that. But, um, you know, how often do pastors even take a biblical story and then tell a real life or a fictional allegory to hammer home the point? You look at Jesus's teachings, a lot of his teaching was parable, which is what? It's storytelling. You know what I mean? Like, it's taking cultural stories for an agricultural society and telling them a story in a parable, which is what? Fictional storytelling. You know what I mean? Like, now he's telling truth all the way through it. And I think that's the art of a good storyteller. They tell truth without, without detail, if that kind of makes sense. And I think that's what fiction is. So, read more of it, people.
Yeah.
So
Well, and even just, I think just the, like, read more, not just fiction, because I think that's, Like I even just see, so I've been trying to just improve habits and just be a little bit more disciplined in my day and and one of the things that I read, so there's a health guy on YouTube, Andrew Huberman, who's like really known for his health knowledge and everything. And one of the things he says is just don't look at a screen like an hour before bed. And like I know people hear that, but they don't really take it seriously. So I've actually been doing that for the past week where at like 9:30, 10 o'clock, because I try to go to bed about 11, like no looking at my phone, and I'm only reading a book. And whether it's a theology book or fiction book, my Bible even, I am absolutely noticing a difference, even
Mm.
waking up a little bit earlier than I was in just like feeling better, more refreshed. So I think that there's health benefits to it. But one of the things that just with reading as well, and this was a thing I really noticed with my old group of non-Christian friends before I became a Christian, um, was so many people you can tell when they don't read because the depth of conversation and breadth of conversation is so limited because they just don't actually learn anything new that's interesting. And it was really this was interesting where a friend of mine, he was having a bit of a fight with his mom, and one of the things she said to him, and I mean, it was a little bit harsh, but there was actually truth to it because this was when he and I were these like useless bums at one point, and she just said to him like, "You're not interesting," and she said that in like a like you do nothing, you don't know anything, you don't because he had no skills, like we were just these bums. Now, thankfully, I also was a reader, so I was a bum that read, so it's like I didn't but he wasn't, and so it was just interesting to seeing how as even as, Christians, where we're supposed to love our neighbor, it's like, well, part of that is living in the world and being able to engage in the world, and I know you and I who have done street evangelism, in presently and in the past, when you have a breadth of knowledge, you can then engage with so many more types of people and speak to people on different things, and the only way that happens is by reading. Again, it doesn't have to be a book, it could be reading the news, it could be reading, articles on, websites like the Ezra Institute or wherever, but it was just like, I think one of the things that is just really important is, like, we just need to be people that read. Full
Yeah.
stop, broad, like you were mentioning earlier, you read historical fiction. I love reading biographies. I actually really love reading. It's yeah, even things on like business books. I like reading things about technology, about sports. Like there's been some really fascinating sports books that I've read in the past. Things about economics. Anyways, all that to say, like, one of the things as Christians, I think, that we need to be doing is, like, reading allows us to love our neighbor more because that was the thing I found with my dad. My dad read a ton. He could talk about a little bit about everything, and it allowed him to be able to talk to almost anybody. And, like, that was the thing that he taught me, and, like, that's the thing that I like. So, I think that's one of these things about reading why I think it is so important because it is actually a help us to love our neighbor.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. Um, like, I think what an underrated skill in just life is being a generalist in a lot of things. And I think that's what we're kind of getting at, and reading helps with that. So, um, like, I just using myself as an example, I feel like I can hold a conversation in about sports, about nerd stuff, about movies, about basically any subject except for cars because I just know nothing about cars. But like, we want to talk about, guns. Sure, I can talk about guns. I can talk about clothing. I can talk about whatever. But like, I can't talk to the same level equally in all of those things. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
but I know enough to carry a conversation. It's that idea. Like, I remember somebody once telling me you should learn how to golf, and I don't golf myself, but they were like, but you never have to master golf. Just get good enough that you're a bogey golfer. And his thing was like, because a bogey golfer can play golf with anybody and not hold the game up. You know what I mean? They're one stroke behind, but at the end of the day, the difference is very like you're not going to feel it per hole type thing. And he basically took that analogy and applied that to all things in life. He's like, know a little about every subject, enough that you can ask intelligent questions about every subject, and you'll never be outside of a conversation, right? Like, and then when you play this into like, because I know people's minds will immediately go, well, I talk to people who have the same interests as me, so why would I care if I can talk about this other subject over here? And you nailed it. Like a lot of the people we interact with in our lives, in our business, in our workplaces, in our neighborhoods have different interests than us, particularly if we're Christians, and having a way to like bridge the gaps into conversations that you can, make a foothold into a conversation, become friends, have a shared interest, and talk about it. Like, so there's one of my neighbors that we talk about nothing except for the Blue Jays. I don't even really watch the Blue Jays, but I know enough about baseball to be like, what do you think about Vladdy's contract? You know what I mean? Like, and then that bridges the gap that now we have a friendly enough relationship. Like, hey man, how's it going? Like, you know what I mean? And we chat, and then the gospel comes out. What do you do for a living? What do you like? And then it's not awkward. It's not like an ending conversation. Obviously, on the streets, it happens all the time. And uh, you know, a defense for reading, just in general, I would say, I learned so much about culture, so much about like topics, sports or whatever it is, through reading, not just watching and going like I'm trying to think of an example. There was a book I read that had recipes at the end of the book. Like it was a spy novel, and it was like, here's spycraft. And then, I'm not a spy. I'm not working for the Russians or anything like that. But like I learned things about like how they think and how they operate that like applies to how like when I was managing people at my last job. It's like, well, I know what you're kind of trying to do, like, because and it just things play out. So um it's an underrated quality, like this idea that like you are always learning. Your mind is never staying static. So, like everything you're putting into it, teaching it something. And so when you're reading, you're actually learning, even if it's just vocabulary. You know what I mean? Like, um, you know, we learn sometimes by just repetition and reading. And so there's something we talk about a lot at the church. Sentences, not paragraphs. So like people will remember a sentence, not a paragraph, if that makes sense. I don't know who actually said that originally, probably Nate because he's brilliant. But and I was thinking about this, like there's many quotes that I remember from books, fiction, nonfiction, secular, whatever, that have an impact on me down the road. And so I'll give you an example. One in the first law, there's a character called Logan Nine Figures who I think is hilarious and amazing. But he has a line, and it's like his line is, "It's better to do something than live in the fear of it." You know what I mean? And I read that novel 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, but that line has impacted my life, even though it's not a Christian author, it's not anything, because there's lots of things that as a guy that I know that I need to do, and it needs to get done, and it's better to do the thing than live in fear of doing the thing. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so it's like, you
Yep.
know, uh, you talked about this at our men's conference a couple of years ago. Like, do hard things. Like,
Yep.
men are called to do hard things. And what is living in fear of something? Not doing the hard thing, right? And so there's just an example of a book changing kind of the way we operate in our lives, and that happens at all times. Because you know, for me, I got super passionate into uh, kind of like reclaiming my reading of fiction, and kind of like more openly doing it, not in the secrets of like, well, I don't want anybody to know I read fiction. During COVID, when everybody was stuck at home, you know what I mean? Like there was like 10 of us that weren't, um, you know, we're fine with going out and still doing stuff, but you can't hang with the same people every day.
Yeah.
And everybody would just be like, I'm done on Netflix. I don't want to watch anything. And my thing was like, well, I'm not watching anything on Netflix because all I'm doing is reading, and books don't run out and they take way longer. So I kind of was just like, I like books better. So I'll just do that instead of watching Netflix. But,
Yeah.
um, yeah, that was kind of me.
What would you say is your favorite book series or franchise of all time? If you had to choose one. If you Desert Island, you can take one series book. I'm gonna say the Cosmere doesn't count. It would have to be an individual within that, but like what would be the one that you would take?
Yeah, I know everybody's gonna want me to say Lord of the Rings, but I don't. Lord of the Rings is my second favorite series.
Okay.
So my favorite series is a bit of a weird one. Like, my favorite series is, and I'm sorry, just let me clarify. I'm assuming Star Wars because that would be the longest, so it like doesn't count because it's 190 in
Yeah.
inner unconnected books, so I don't count that. My favorite series is by a Canadian author named Stephen Erickson. It's called Malazan Book of the Fallen.
Oh, I didn't know he was
Uh,
Canadian.
he is Canadian.
Oh,
He's an
yeah.
not paleontologist, archaeologist. And they wrote this game. They wrote these novels based on they created a tabletop game when they were in university. Him and another guy named Ian Esselmont, who also writes. And they created basically a Dungeons and Dragons like tabletop game. And but then they ended up writing. Well, the one guy wrote a series called Malazan Book of the Fallen, or Malazan, however you want to say it. Two people say it different. And they're 10 very hard books. They're 10 very long books, but there's no book that doesn't like they hit on every theme that's out there. And some characters are awful, and you're like, this is terrible stuff to read. And some of it is like that is just the most heartfelt, lovely thing that's ever happened. And so I that's my favorite series. Uh, I think partly because it was the most work to get through, and so I felt the most sense of accomplishment when I finished it. But also, just I would say, um, we're creatures of community in and you've experienced this with Stormlight around the church. I read that before I knew anybody else was into it. So like I didn't really have that when I read Stormlight. So I have kind of hand that. Whereas Malazan, when I was reading it, like there was a podcast out on Spotify called 10 Very Big Books that I was kind of going through the series with them through the podcast. I was on Discord, Reddit, and the Reddit community around Malazan is great. So that would be my favorite series, which is um odd because it's probably the only one that no one's actually ever listened to me and gone and read themselves. Because it's like and this is not a brag in any way, like I think it's like the PhD fantasy series. Like it's not easy. It doesn't explain anything. It throws you into the middle of a world and just is like, okay, figure it out. Like the
But
magic system is
do you think
crazy.
that would be helpful for people to know going into it though? If they actually just knew that, like, hey, you're not the intention here is that you're not going to understand.
Yeah, yeah. Anybody I recommend the first book, which is called Gardens of the Moon, too. That's kind of my thing. I was like, you're probably gonna hate this. Like, you're probably gonna like it eventually, but like at the first 2, 3, 400 pages, which I realize is an insane amount of pages to somebody to not be enjoying it, like you're not gonna figure it out. And you're not gonna figure it out yet, but there'll be a moment where it clicks and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I see what's happening now. And then they're able to get you're able to grasp. The thing that makes that series so hard is that unlike a typical like fantasy series, the cast of characters, the location, and the like setting changes every book. So like book one doesn't pick up again until book three, and then it doesn't pick up again until book seven. So like
Mm.
that storyline is in books one, like three and seven, and then there's another storyline that goes from books two, six, eight, and and they all culminate together in book 10. And it's like, but like, so it's hard because you get characters that you think are going to be the main characters and they're not. You know what I mean? Like, and
Right.
there is no like, this is the one like center figure. And so it's just a very different
Mm. See,
thing.
we both felt that with Kings of the Wild, right? Where I wanted more of those characters, and they're at least for right now, from what we can tell, where he's at in the series, like we're not necessarily maybe the little cameos or whatever, but uh, we don't. There's whole other characters. Each book is on a different set of characters. It's like, but I want more Moog. Actually, I want Moog.
Yeah. And that can be like that's jarring if you're super invested in a group of
Yeah.
people, right? Like, and so Malazan does that to you, and that makes
Okay.
it tough. Kings of
Yeah.
the Wild, I've only read the first one, so like I
Yeah.
have the other one to go, but I partly put it off because I think you were the one that told me like, um, it's not the same group, and I'm like, I don't want to hate it just because it's not the same group.
Yeah.
But
That book was an example for me of having to just kind of persist with a book a little bit because I'm not one. I will not finish a book. So like we got DNF, like do not finish. Like I will, if I'm not enjoying a book after a certain amount of time, like I will bail on it because time is precious and I'm not going to read something that I don't enjoy.
sure.
And that one was just like it got pretty close to it. And so I started reading it and then I got caught up in something else, put it down. A couple months went by, hadn't finished it. Just like, okay, I'm gonna give it one more try, kept reading it, and then by the end of it, I adore that book. Kings of the Wild. He's also a guy here just in Ontario. I can't Nick what's the other
Nicholas Ames.
Yeah, Nicholas Hames, that's it. So that was like a great I actually really just adore that book. I think that was one of the most fun books. The, again, there's a couple things that happen in it that you almost feel guilty about laughing at, but it's like that is actually just hilarious. And what is it like Moog's magic phylactery, and it's just like he does it so well, and it's so funny, and you just kind of have to read it. But
Yeah,
um,
it's a great one.
yeah. So all right,
You'll
well, before we wrap up, Chris, is there anything else? Actually, here, real quick, because some people often ask this: is an audiobook reading a book? Why don't
Yeah,
we? Yeah.
yeah. Here's my things. I prefer to read the physical copies. Like I generally use my audio credits like from Audible for actually theology type books, like biographies, stuff like that. But like for hundreds and hundreds of years they didn't have physical copies of books. They just oriented like to each other stories throughout things. So like listening to an audiobook, well, is it the same as sitting down with pen and paper and underlining everything? No, but it's not any worse. Like if your mind can retain what's being said, like is it better to read a sermon to hear a sermon? Well, I think I would say yes, either works. Like whatever it works best for you. So I am fine with audiobooks. I count audiobooks on my Goodreads. When I finish a book and it's audio, I chalk it up as pages read this year. You know what I mean? Like, because I still took the hours to do it. Now, I listen to audiobooks at 1.4, which I think you said was the same as you.
Roughly.
Um,
Yep.
yeah, so 1.4. But I also know that 1.4 is about how fast I read because I often will. I'm just going to use this book as an example. Like sometimes I'll have the audiobook and I'll read the physical book along with it. Like, because if I have a Christian book and I have an audio, I might do that so I could underline as I'm still listening. Like,
Mhm.
and I know that I read about 1.3 and a half, 1.4 and a half speed when I'm reading. So like that to me is exactly accurate. So, um, yeah, I get frustrated when, and it's usually people that I don't know or whatever will say things like it doesn't count when it's audio. It's like based on what? Like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
my thing is like, okay, cool. Like
Yeah.
you don't, you don't judge my spreadsheet. So,
Yeah.
mm,
I think it's a great way to get more people investing in stories and good
mm,
stories. And Melissa just does not have the time to sit down and read a book that much, but it's like she has time throughout the day that she can listen to it. So it's like jackpot. Why not take advantage of the technology that we have to be able to enjoy things like that instead of otherwise you're just not going to get it.
yeah,
And
exactly.
there's too many good stories
Amen.
to not. But all right, well,
Yeah.
Chris, it was a blast having you, my friend.
Anytime.
This was
Anytime.
a I mean, yeah, we just pretty much took everybody when Chris and I see each other at church, we just pretty much put that into what is looking like about an hour and a half podcast of just talking about books and things. And so this was good. And
I
Chris,
sort of forgot we were being recorded. So
what's that? Yeah.
I kind of forgot we were being recorded.
Well, there you go.
So
There you go. Yeah. And so, yeah. And so for, again, I think many of our listeners already knew who Chris was, the Rebel podcast. Um, Chris, do you even have Twitter? Do you even have that?
no,
No. Okay.
I made the choice a while, like 5 or 6 years ago. Like Twitter was one of those things that I spent too much time. wasting time on.
Right.
So I'm not really on it, but I am on Facebook. I am on
Okay.
Instagram. So
Well, you can
Facebook's the
find.
only one that I ever pay
Okay.
attention to.
Well,
So
if you want people to be able to follow you there, I can put your handles in the show notes.
love
Um,
it.
but
Love it.
also, listeners, just a reminder that we are also going to be starting our book club, which will be for our patrons and our Discord. We're starting working our way through The Princess Bride. I think we're going to be having our first meetup there on May 5th to discuss The Princess Bride. So if you are interested in joining us as we discuss and work through The Princess Bride, you can join us over on Patreon. And then also another teaser in a week or two. I can't quite remember. We're going to be dropping the first episode of the Conversations by Stormlight show, where Nate and Ben, again, are working their way through and talking about the Stormlight archive. I think we're going to be releasing the first episode publicly, and then the rest of them we're going to offer as exclusive shows for our Patreon subscribers. So if you want to check out all of those, you can go and check us out and join on Patreon. So anyways, listeners, this was another wonderful opportunity to nerd out. Chris, thank you for joining. And listeners, again, join us over on Patreon. Go be nerdy, stay nerdy, and thanks for joining. Peace.